Meanwhile, till they fix those things, and hopefully things work, welcome. How was your morning? Did you have breakfast? Doesn't seem so. Coffee? Is there coffee here? Yeah. Okay, good to know. So promise, you're gonna all get coffee after this session, if you haven't got it right. So I'm Egyptian, all right? So anyone here Egyptian? No one. Wow. I'm surprised because I was told that the population of Egyptians in Istanbul is more than the population of Turkish people, isn't it? Like, whenever I walk in the street, I see Egyptians, right? Or well, on the other side, when I go to Germany, for example, I only meet Turkish people. So I see how it goes. Egyptians go to Istanbul, Istanbul go to Turkey, to Germany. So should
okay, yeah. Thank you. Arkadaşlar hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Adım Gökalp Gürbüzer. İstanbul Java User Group'un bir üyesiyim. Burada hepinize geldiğiniz için teşekkür ediyorum. Yani Türkiye'deki nadide uluslararası yazılım konferanslarından bir tanesi. Biz Java User Group olarak ne yapıyoruz? İstanbul Java User Group olarak İşte bu etkinlikleri düzenliyoruz. İşte ücretsiz kendi aramızda yaptığımız bazı etkinlikler de oluyor. Ve yılda bir de işte Java Day İstanbul adı altında bir etkinlik tertip ediyoruz. Şu ana kadarki yaptığımız en büyük etkinlik bu 2018. Bundan sonra da hani talebe göre büyütmeyi umuyoruz. Hepinize geldiğiniz için teşekkür ederim. Ben bu salonda Silikonf'tan sorulacak sorulardan da sorumlu olacağım. Silikonf uygulamasını indirmeyen varsa AMahdy'ye veya diğer konuşmacılara soru sormak için Silikonf uygulamasını indirip şurada arkada kare kodları var. Soru sorabilirsiniz. Sorular like ve dislike alıyor. En çok like alan sorulara ödül vermeyi planlıyoruz. O yüzden yani aynı zamanda da sorulması istediğiniz soruları tabii ki hani kısa bir zaman olduğu için AMahdy'nin ve diğer konuşmacıların burada kısa bir zaman olacak sorular almak için. Herkesin duyacağı soruları uygulama üzerinden sormanız faydalı olacaktır. Ben sözü AMahdy'ye bırakıyorum. Teşekkür ederim geldiğiniz için. İyi bir gün geçirmenizi diliyorum.
Sure. All right. I hope he said good things about me because I understood nothing. But yeah, thank you for the introduction. I hope it was. And yeah, I know Czech currently, at least, the same word. Yeah. So again, welcome and welcome to the day. My name is Mahdi. I am a developer advocate for a company called Vaadin. So how many of you know Vaadin? Awesome, awesome. Okay, for the two who didn't raise their hand, Vaadin actually, surprise, surprise, means a reindeer. So this little guy is called Vaadin in the Finnish language. So the company HQ is located in Finland, but we have offices in Germany and in USA and many other small cities. And that's the reason behind our logo, basically, like a shape of a reindeer somehow related to code as well. But effectively, Vaadin is development environment for front end. And recently, if you're following the news, we have announced about the beta version of Vaadin 10. So Vaadin 10 is basically a huge milestone in the company and in the framework and everything. We have reinvented how the framework works, as well as the whole components of the Vaadin tools. So first of all, just to make it clear, Vaadin is completely free and open source. It's not something like something that you have to buy to try or something like that. It's free and open source. And what I'm going to do throughout this presentation is just giving you a glimpse about what happened, why we made this change, and also justify why we decided to do that, what is going on with the web platform. So a little bit of a history about Vaadin. Vaadin started in 2001, so we've been in market for almost 17 years now, or even more. And we had huge milestones going on over the years. The recent one was last year when we moved from Ajax, GWT, and so on. And we had a strong history of stability with our framework that shows that our APIs doesn't change that much throughout the years. But with the version 8 that was announced last year, we started to adopt the so-called web components. So more about web components later, but what happened this year is that we detached our UI components from the core framework and made them pure web components. What that means? It means that they are now separate. You can use them regardless of your framework. You can use them with Angular, with Vue, with React, and so on. Or you can still use them if you are a Java lover. And I assume most of you are, since you are here. Anyone here doesn't like Java? No one dare to do it, right? So it's okay. If you don't like Java, you can just say. No one? Okay, interesting. So what happened later is we decided to come up with a new product called Vaadin Flow. And Vaadin Flow is basically a Java interface that connects you from the back-end Java to the web components on the front end. And eventually we call it Vaadin 10. So Vaadin 10 is the collection of pure web components and Java framework. Now, let's analyze this. Let's take everything into pieces and see how it works and why we did that from the first place. So Vaadin 10 consists of core components, flow, and APIs for the server side. The flow is basically the connector between the APIs level and the core components, and everything we call Vaadin 10. So unlike Vaadin 6, 7, 8, it used to be just the Java framework, and that's it. Now we have Vaadin 8 that consists of many things. And as I said, you can just use the components if you wish, or you can use the Java APIs if you wish, or you can use Flow. So what is Vaadin 10? Now, how many of you are developing with Java? Okay, everyone? Anyone didn't raise his or her hand? No one. Okay, awesome. So this is exactly for you. If you are developing with the Java and you want to maintain the consistency between the server side and the front end to be always in Java, then this is a very interesting solution. Especially if you are using Vaadin already, then you will not find a huge difference. We maintain the promise of 100% Java, which means that you write 100% Java and you get UI based on it. And that's basically what I'm going to show you in the demo number 1. But I have a small disclaimer. This is not my laptop. So any problem that will happen, I blame the laptop. So let me try to see if this is going to make any sense. Gather Windows. Okay, so I have the source code here. Oh my. I have the source code here. I hope you can see it clearly. This is a very simple source code that shows you how is it like to develop with Vaadin 10. Basically, I'm having a main view. You can see that I have a few annotations like route, the route of the application, which is the main. And I have theme. I'm choosing the Lumo theme. And also, I'm just defining a button that has the word click me and adding it to the main view. And finally, I have a click listener that when you click on the button, it adds a label to the UI. Very simple. And the result of this is like this. So let's refresh. It's a button. When I click on it, it says added from button. Again, added from button, and so on. So you can see that the process is quite simple. If you have very basic Java Swing knowledge or very basic Java, you will find that this is very straightforward. I haven't written any single HTML line. I haven't written any JavaScript line. I haven't had to take care of the communication between the front end and the back end, Ajax, and all these kind of things. Just pure Java code, click listener, event handling, and so on. So this is the first model that I have. And this is basically how it works. But what's big with Vaadin 10 also is that if you are a front-end developer, you can only use the components because they are standard web components, which means that you can use them regardless of the framework that you are using. I have many examples and tutorials showing how to use those components, for example, with Angular, Vue, React, and so on. And theoretically, it should work with any framework. If the framework does not support web components, that's a problem in the framework itself and should be solved soon. More about that a little bit later. But also, there is an interesting thing is if you don't like to use our components for some reason, you still can use the Vaadin flow to make the communication between back-end and front-end. So even though Vaadin works perfectly with Jakarta EE and works perfectly with Spring and any kind of back-end, but if for some reason you decided that you want to have your own back-end and you don't want to use Vaadin, that's completely fine. Vaadin flow can also be interesting for you to make the serialization and deserialization between front-end and back-end. So again, the big picture, we have APIs on the server side, we have standard web components on the client side, and we have flow that makes the connection. So let's take them one by one. What is the components APIs? Basically, Vaadin 10 comes with some few built-in components that you can use out of the box, like what I showed you, the button and the label, and some other interesting basic components that any UI might use, obviously. But there is some also heavy components like grid, for example. Grid is probably one of our most used component and most downloaded component. It's like a table, but it has a lot of functionalities like sorting and reordering and so on. Nevertheless, we also have some Google paper components built into the framework. And the language of the framework is very straightforward and simple. You define an object, like horizontal layout, for example. You define buttons, save button, cancel button, and then you add them to the horizontal layout. The result will be 2 buttons placed horizontally. You can also have a click listener on the buttons, for example. Like when you click on the save button, it calls the save method, and the cancel button calls the cancel method, and so on. We have also some default interfaces that you can use out of the box inside your APIs to be able to implement extended functionalities like has style or has size. So they come with some default methods that you don't really need to touch. They are implemented already for you, but you can extend the functionalities. Now, how to create a custom component? Now, I'm still on the Java side. You can do 3 interesting approaches, which is server-side composition by extending its existing component, or you can use the add annotation tag, or you can use the composite class. And if you are more of the front-end guru, then you can go with the last option, which is creating a custom client-side component. So the last option is straightforward. If you are a front-end person and you want to create your own custom component, just create a component using JavaScript and HTML. That's going to work. And here is the power that whoever created a component using jQuery, using Angular, using React, or so on, can work with the component, with the framework. You don't really have to do extra work, as far as it is a standard web component. But the 3 first options are even a nice addition that allows you to even get more access from the Java interface. Now let's explore them. The first one is simple. You just extend an existing component, like div. So there is a component called div, and you want to just make it a little bit more customized to your needs, so you just extend it. Basic Java, right? But if you don't like this, you can also use the @tag annotation. Now here, it might not make sense, because why not extend div? But it might make sense when we come later to see custom components where the tag itself is not available. So we will see that there are some tags that are not available in the framework already, and you want to extend them, and you want to push them inside the framework, so the @tag annotation will come handy. And finally, using the composite. Composite is a class inside the framework that gives you an interesting approach, which is not exposing the APIs of the actual parent component. So when you extend div directly, there is a drawback that the user of your extended component can modify some public APIs. But composite actually wrap the existing component and doesn't expose except the methods that you want them to be exposed. So about creating a custom component, I have the second demo today, which is basically showing you how to do that. Shortcuts. Okay, so again, back to my code. I have here an example component. It's a very simple class called Vaadin welcome that extends composite of div. So again, I used composite because I don't want to expose all the APIs of div. I just want to use a portion of them. And to make it simple, I just added two components. The first one is an image, and the second one is a label. And here I'm showing you how to use an image. This image is basically located inside the web app folder. So it's an SVG file, which is also showing you that we can use an SVG. And here, a label with a simple text. So a very simple div that adds picture and label. Now, to try this, what I'm going to do is basically, instead of those lines, I'm going to just add new Vaadin welcome. Was it called Vaadin welcome? Yeah. It doesn't. No. Okay, that's interesting keyboard as well. Here we go. I don't know if this is gonna work, but let's see. So at some point it should detect modification and refresh the server. If it doesn't, then I'm gonna just restart the server. No, not yet. Okay, let's just restart the server quickly. So there is, of course, ways to make automated redeploy. Again, I blame the laptop. It's not mine. It's easy, right? But of course, you can use some of hot deploy tools that automatically detect changes and redeploy. So here we go. So the SVG file and the label. Maybe I can make this a little bit smaller to see it. So now, nothing big different, except that I extended the div and added some extra functionalities. Okay, moving forward. Back to the general picture. So we talked about the component API. This is how to extend the component side APIs. Now, the second part, which is the core components. I've been telling you about these core components since the first beginning of the presentation. Now, let's talk about them. As of right now, we have approximately 50 components, free open source, available in the directory. You can try them, use them using NPM, if you wish. Nevertheless, the biggest interesting thing about them is that they are web component standards. So how many of you know about web component standards? 1, 2, maybe? Okay, so web component standard is a new standard. It's effective now and available in all browsers that allows you to create a custom markup and use it inside the browser. So in a quick introduction, custom component is basically, web component or a custom component is basically having 4 concepts: import, shadow DOM, custom elements, and HTML template. So how it works? Basically, I want to have a custom tag inside the browser. So first of all, I create a template. What is the contents of this template eventually? For example, it has some divs, some h1, some image, some input fields, and so on, some JavaScript code that performs some functionalities. So this is an HTML file. Now I give it a name. That's the custom element definition. You give it a name, for example, my-component or something like that. The only constraint here is that it must contain a hyphen in between, or a dash. Okay, and this is probably for the browser to be able to differentiate between built-in components, like div, input, and so on, or your own custom components. The third part is a shadow DOM. So when you include this inside your web page, basically it renders as a single line markup HTML language, but if you enable show shadow content, you're going to see something like that. And this has been clear and effective since a long time ago when they announced about the video tag in HTML5. We were all happy about it, and we thought that it's a native implementation, but it was not. It's actually a custom component implemented by the browser. If you open it and see the shadow DOM, you're going to see that it consists of a bunch of input fields and div fields and so on. So what's big about it right now is that finally developers are able to create their own custom markup language. They can create a custom component that can be used inside the browser, just like just like video. So back then we were waiting, let's hope that HTML5 gets standard, let's hope that all browsers support HTML5 and so on, but now we don't need that anymore. You just create a custom component and it's going to be supported by all browsers. And finally, how to actually effectively include this element inside your page is using HTML imports. Even though this exact method is debated, some browser vendors like Safari and Firefox refuse to include it. So it has been finally replaced with the ES module imports. So you don't need to do that anymore. You just include it just like any standard script. You know the script tag, script source equal. You just include it like that. But the compromise here is the file cannot be HTML anymore. It has to be a JavaScript file. And this also has been solved by Google when they announced about this modulizer in Polymer that allows you to convert an HTML file or an HTML web component into a JavaScript web component. So the biggest benefit here is having some sort of object-oriented functionalities inside your browser. Encapsulation, inheritance, reusability, and so on. You can now define a component and give it to your colleagues and give it to everyone in the web to be able to use it. And as I said, it's a standard. So a standard means that anyone can use it. If we're talking about a very famous framework, maybe React, for example, by Facebook. So React uses, at the end of the day, the browser language, which is div, input, span, h1, h2, and so on, right? So now it's a standard as well. So if I create something like my dash component, React should be able to use it as well. And the same for Angular and so on. From Vaadin point of view, this gives two benefits. The first benefit is that if anyone develop any kind of component, we can use it inside Vaadin. And the other benefit is we can contribute to the community that anyone that uses any kind of framework like React, Vue, and so on can use those open source components. This is a chart showing you browser support of all the components. You can see that all browsers support everything. And as you can see here, HTML imports has been on hold for both Safari and Firefox. But I can tell you fairly that this HTML import is going to go away. That's my feeling. And we're going to just stick with ES module kind of imports. So how we are building those web components, as of right now, we are building it using something called Polymer. Polymer library is a library developed originally by Google that helps developing web components, but that's not necessarily the only tools that you have to use to create a custom component. You can use also Ionic Stencil, or recently, as Google announced, maybe you can also use Lit Element, which is a more lightweight and more nice way. But regardless of the library, it doesn't matter because the end result is a standard ES module that you can use. So if you are using Polymer and someone else uses Ionic, it doesn't matter. The end result is going to be the same. The stable version is based on Polymer 2.x, and you know Google I/O is next week, and I know that Google gonna announce about Polymer 3, and we already have Polymer 3 preview available in our GitHub repositories. If you go to the Alva channel, you are gonna find it. Also, one of the interesting things is that there is a website called webcomponents.org that can list that lists basically most of all the available web components in the whole internet. You can go there and browse any standard web components that you might be interested to use. Nevertheless, we have created something called Vaadin directory, where we include only verified web components. Verified means that we know that it works and it makes sense. Sometimes people just create a web component just to test, like how to create a web component and leave it like that. So we don't want to include those kind of thing and waste your time. That's why we created the Vaadin directory, where we have included up to right now approximately 500 standard web component verified thumb up to use them. Again, to the big image. I talked about the components API, if you are a Java person. I talked about the core components, if you are a front-end person. Now, what is the flow? As I said, flow is the connector. It connects between front-end and back-end. Now, for the front-end, we have the HTML element, which is pretty standard, and anyone can create anything on that. But what we enforce, or what we recommend to use, is on the server side, you could use a class called Polymer template for Java. So flow, if you want to use flow, basically you can have this kind of web component on the front end. Again, it can be any web component. It doesn't have to be built with Polymer. But on the server side, this is how to connect to this kind of component. So if I go back to the previous slide, we can see that I have here, for example, an ID. That's the name of the component. And I have here also an ID for this div area. Now, on the server side, to make the connection, I just put an annotation, add ID content area. So this annotation gonna link this object with this ID that is on the HTML file. You don't need to initialize it or anything. The framework gonna do it for you. Here, I am extending Polymer template, and I'm adding HTML imports of mylayout.html, and the tag, this is the name of the component inside the browser. When you need to use this, if you want to include external component that is not already part of the framework. So what is the flow? What does it do for you? Basically, it shares the state between server side and client side. So we have the model that contains the state. So instead of making this kind of communication and serialization and so on, we just update this, this model. And as I said, flow will serialize and deserialize everything automatically for you. The second part is the event handler, which is basically a mechanism to communicate back to the server. So I clicked on the button, I need to communicate to the server, and then I make a round trip back to the client. So this is an example code. The first 3 lines that we see here are basically HTML div that when you click on it, it calls a method called update status. And update status basically changes this argument to be connecting to server. Very simple stuff, very standard JavaScript code. But on the Java side, which is Vaadin flow side, basically you put this add event handler annotation and give it the same method name, and that's it. So on the server side, what will happen is when you click here, it will go this on the client side, but it will go to this on the server side as well. And you can see that I'm getting the model. This is the shared state, and updating the state. So making it simple and easy for you. And finally, the element APIs, which is basically the APIs that can allow you to make the communication. So the element APIs are actually a very low-level, deep-level implementation of any kind of custom element that you can use, for example, to change the attribute, to add an event listener, any kind of custom event listener, and so on. We're talking here about custom component, and from the Java point of view, we don't necessarily have implementation for all its custom arguments and custom events. So this is the very deep level that allows you to go deep and make your custom implementation. So I think I talked about everything at this point. I talked about the component APIs, the core elements, the flow, what is the flow. As I said, you can use each part independently. You don't necessarily have to use all of them. But if you want to go all the way Ninja and Java, then you can use just Java 10, Vaadin 10, and you don't really have to worry about all these deep details. The final demo that I have for you today is basically showing you how to create a custom element. So I have here an example template. And on the front end side, I have this example template as well. So this is a HTML code for a component that is called example-template. It has a very simple div that is asking you what is the best UI framework. And it has a button that when you click on it, it goes to a method called handleClick. And handleClick method is defined over here that updates the value searching. So this value is going to be updated to searching immediately. Now, this is very helpful if you want to make some client-side code, if you want to make offline code, if you want to make any client-side validation or something like that. But when you want to communicate this back to the server side, then here Vaadin flows comes as a help, only if this opens. Yeah, I'm opening the wrong file. Where is it? Here we go. So it only helps with Vaadin flow is you make the add tag annotation to example template, and then here I have the add event handler annotation on top of a method called handleClick. So inside this method, I try to just simulate a slow server, so wait for 2 seconds, and then get the shared model and update the value to the word Vaadin. Now let's see this in action. Instead of this line, where is it? Yeah, here we go. So add new example template. And again, probably reload will not work. So let's just close the server and restart. And let's see the results. Yeah, I'd love to repeat again. You don't really have to do that. You can use any of hot redeployment tools to automatically reload for you. But since this is a demo laptop, I will keep blaming the laptop. All right, so what is the best UI framework? And the button that tells you go. When you click on it, it goes to the front end first and makes searching, and then it waits 2 seconds on the server side and then display the word, of course, Vaadin. So, what kind of applications are built with Vaadin 10? I cannot really tell you that there are many applications built as of right now because it has been just announced beta a few weeks ago. So no big applications. But since we have been in the market for many, many years, over 17 years now, we have a lot of success stories about applications built with old versions of the framework. But nevertheless, we have a demo application available free and open source that you can check it out that shows what kind of things that you can do with the framework. So we're showing here some navigation, some charts, some interaction, tabbed component, grid, and search, and so on. So this is an interesting application that you might be interested in. Nevertheless, if you head to our website, vaadin.com, the whole website has been rewritten with Vaadin 10. So anything that you see on our website is basically built with Vaadin 10. Now, you might think a static website, why we build it with Vaadin 10? It's not really static because we have user interaction, we have forums, we have a lot of things. But if you like it, then the big thing about it is that it's all written completely in Vaadin 10. And you can even in the browser show source code to be able to see those custom components and how they are loaded. Actually, if I have time, maybe I can show you quickly now. So vaadin.com. Oh, not connect. Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, this is not I. Do you have an I here? Yeah, here is a suggestion. There is a good suggestion here. Yeah. So this is the website. If I view page source, well, a lot of styles and stuff like that. actually, there is a more interesting thing, which is inspect element. That's going to be easier. You see, for example, VC site footer, VC contact form, and so on. So everything is just custom. So this part is great like that because it's a shadow root. Probably the person owning this laptop has some developer flag enabled. But nevertheless, along with div, we have, for example, custom style and a bunch of custom components used and so on. Iron icon and so on. So, yeah, it's beta. Maybe soon we're gonna announce the RC version, who knows? But as a summary, what I talked about during this presentation, basically web components and why web components. I strongly recommend that you start using web components right now, just now, the prime time. And if you know of a framework that doesn't support it, then bug them and tell them that they have to support web components because this is the future. We have discussed about the actual Vaadin components that you can use with the framework or with other frameworks. We have talked about the component APIs if you are in love with the Java side. We have talked also about Vaadin flow if you want to just make the bridge and communication regardless of whatever components you use on the front end and whatever back end you have. So Vaadin 10, in summary, provide you with everything you want. If you want integration and everything that works together, then Vaadin 10 might be interesting for you. But nevertheless, I hope this presentation was helpful. I have 2 more things to say. First of all, you might be wondering how to deploy an application and start using it. Head to my blog, vaadin.com/blog. You're gonna find a few interesting blog posts on how to deploy onto multiple cloud. And I'd love to highlight this Oracle Cloud thingy that I tried recently. It's basically quite straightforward. Also, Hokel. It's also very interesting and very fast to deploy. So try them out, but the highlight about Oracle Cloud is that if you want to, it's not free, but if you want to try it out, I can give you away some free credits. Like Oracle give me some free credit to distribute. So reach me on Twitter if you have questions or if you want some Oracle free credit to test those applications and follow the instructions. And the last thing that I have for you is this interesting link. If you are following the trends of PWA and you want to know how to follow progressive web apps inside your Java application, maybe you might be interested in this article and the GitHub project. I think I have a few minutes left if I have questions.